It was supposed to be a special day, my birthday. Not the kind that needs a grand celebration. Just a simple, happy birthday. And maybe a slice of cake would have been enough. But as the morning light poured through the blinds and the clock struck 8, I realized he'd forgotten. I stared at the empty kitchen table. The silence louder than any argument we'd ever had. No card, no message, not even a lazy, "Hey, babe." Just the sound of his footsteps rushing out the door, phone in hand, laughter echoing down the hall. That laughter used to be for me. His name was Ryan, my boyfriend of 3 years. We'd met in college, shared late-night dreams about the future, and promised to grow together. But lately, it felt like he was growing somewhere else, towards someone else. I brushed the thought aside as I scrolled through my messages. Nothing from him. Just a text from my mom and a few automated birthday emails from stores pretending to care. I sighed and poured myself some coffee. At noon, Ryan texted, "Busy day. Don't wait up for dinner." No emoji. No heart. Just words that cut deeper than they looked. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. Disappointed. Sure. But part of me still made excuses for him. Maybe he's planning something later. Maybe he's distracted with work. Maybe he's tired. The word maybe had become my entire relationship. I spent the rest of the day wandering through the city. Every store window had something bright and beautiful. Flowers, jewelry, balloons. I used to think I'd get those one day. Not because I needed them, but because it meant someone thought of me. When I came home that evening, the house smelled faintly of his cologne. He was getting ready to go out. "Hey," I said softly, trying not to sound hurt. "Did you forget something today?" He glanced up from his watch. Did I leave the lights on again?" I froze. He really didn't remember. "It's my birthday, Ryan." His expression shifted for a second. Surprise, then guilt, then a lazy smile. "Oh, right, babe. I've just been slammed at work, you know. We'll celebrate later, okay?" "Later," I repeated quietly. He kissed my cheek as he grabbed his jacket. "You're the best. I owe you." And with that, he was gone. I stood there, surrounded by the echo of the closing door. The house felt colder, emptier. My chest ached, not just from the forgetfulness, but from the realization that I didn't matter anymore. I sat on the couch, scrolling through social media. That's when my heart stopped. Ryan had posted a story, him at a fancy restaurant. Across the table sat a woman I'd seen before. Her name was Vanessa, his coworker. The caption read, "Special night with someone who truly deserves it." The world blurred. My fingers trembled as I stared at the screen. My birthday. And he was out spoiling someone else. I wanted to scream, to cry. But instead, something inside me went quiet, too quiet. And in that silence, a strange calm spread through me. Fine, I thought. If this is the kind of man he is, he deserves to learn what it feels like to be forgotten. That night, as I lay in bed alone, I thought about everything I'd given up for him. My time, my dreams, my peace. And for what? To be invisible on my own birthday? The next morning, I started planning. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum or beg for attention. No, my revenge would be quiet, deliberate, and unforgettable. Ryan loved gifts, especially expensive ones. He loved showing them off, bragging about what he deserved. So I decided that this time, he would receive something truly special, something that would remind him who I really was. I started by visiting the post office. The woman behind the counter smiled politely as I handed her a small, neatly wrapped box. Inside was something that would soon change everything. A reminder, not of love, but of consequences. The label read, "To Ryan Carter. From someone you should have remembered." As I dropped the package into the outgoing mail bin, I felt lighter. My hands stopped shaking. My breath came easier. For the first time in months, I felt in control. Later that day, I called my best friend, Emily. She'd seen everything, the heartbreak, the excuses, the way I'd twisted myself to fit into Ryan's shrinking world. "So, "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice cautious but intrigued. I smiled. "Let's just say he's going to get a surprise delivery." Her laugh was short, almost proud. "About time. He deserves whatever's coming." That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, lit a candle, and played the song we used to dance to. But this time, I didn't cry. I let the music fill the empty spaces he'd left behind. Meanwhile, across town, Ryan was still living in his little illusion, posting photos, smiling with Vanessa, pretending his life was perfect. But he didn't know that the truth was already on its way to his doorstep, signed, sealed, and ready to be delivered. And when that box arrived, everything would change. I didn't expect much that morning. Maybe a simple breakfast together, maybe a hug. Birthdays had never been about grand gestures for me, but they always meant something, especially after everything I'd done to keep our lives running smoothly. I'd been up since dawn, cleaning the kitchen and waiting for him to wake up, telling myself he probably had a surprise planned. But when he walked out of the bedroom, he barely looked at me. "Morning," he mumbled, scrolling through his phone, his thumbs flying across the screen. I smiled softly. "Morning? You slept well?" "Yeah," he said, without looking up. He grabbed his car keys and a slice of toast, then said, "I'll be back late. Don't wait for me for dinner." That was it. No happy birthday, no hug, not even a glance. I stood there, frozen, my fingers clutching the countertop. My heart didn't break all at once. It cracked quietly, like ice underfoot. But what hurt most wasn't the forgetting. It was what came later that evening. Around 7 p.m., I heard laughter outside. His laughter. When I peeked through the window, I saw him standing beside his car, holding a bouquet of red roses and a gift bag wrapped in gold paper. He opened the passenger door, and out stepped her, the woman he'd been seeing secretly for months, though he never admitted it. He handed her the flowers, grinning ear to ear, and I heard him say, "Happy birthday, babe." My knees almost gave way. My birthday, the same day. I watched as they drove off, his hand on hers, the taillights fading into the dark. That night, I sat in the quiet house, every second stretching longer than the last. The dinner I'd prepared for both of us had gone cold. I blew out the candle I'd lit for myself and whispered, "Happy birthday, Clara." I don't remember falling asleep. All I remember is waking up to my phone, buzzing pictures of them together at some expensive restaurant, posted online. The caption read, "Celebrating my love's special day." That was when something in me shifted. I'd been quiet for too long, forgiving too easily. But this time, I wouldn't just move on. I would move smart. For the next few days, I pretended everything was fine. I smiled when he came home, cooked his meals, even ironed his shirts. I became the picture of peace, the calm before the storm. He didn't suspect a thing. While he was busy living his double life, I was quietly collecting every document, every receipt, and every digital trace that proved what he'd been doing. I found the credit card bills that showed the dinners, the jewelry, the weekend getaways, all charged to our shared account. But revenge wasn't about rage. It was about precision and timing. So I waited. The following week, I saw an opportunity. He had gone away for a business trip, or at least that's what he told me. I checked his location through a shared app we'd once downloaded for safety. It showed he wasn't in the city at all. He was 2 hours away, at a beachside resort, with her. I didn't text him. I didn't call. I just smiled and started my plan. The first step was subtle. I moved my money out of the joint account into my personal savings. Then I called the bank and reported suspicious activity on his card. Those luxury purchases he'd made on our account were now under review. The second step was even simpler. I canceled the upcoming insurance payment on his car. It was under my name. But the final move, the one that would make him realize what he'd lost, needed more thought. I didn't want chaos. I wanted impact. That's when I remembered the storage box under my bed. Inside it were years of memories, letters, photos, and one unopened envelope addressed to Clara in his handwriting. I'd never opened it before, thinking it was something private or old. But now, curiosity won. Inside was a note he wrote years ago, before the fights, before the distance. It said, "If I ever forget what matters, remind me who stood by me when I had nothing." I folded it back gently. Maybe this was my reminder of how far I'd come and how much I'd lost to keep someone who no longer cared. So I decided on one final act, something symbolic but unforgettable. I bought a small, elegant box and placed inside it a photo of the two of us from happier days, along with a copy of his note. Then I added a single rose petal, dry, fragile, faded. On top, I placed a note that said simply, "You forgot my birthday, but I'll never forget your lessons. My gift to you is freedom. From me, from guilt, from pretending." I mailed it to his office with express delivery. By the time he got home that evening, I was gone. My clothes, my things, even my scent from the room, all of it vanished, like I'd never existed. He called, dozens of times, then hundreds. The next day, he posted nothing. No photos, no dinners, just silence. A week later, a mutual friend told me he'd received the box and hadn't said a word since. Apparently, he'd opened it in front of his colleagues, thinking it was a surprise gift from his girlfriend. When he read the note, he'd gone pale. That's when I sent him one last text. "Happy belated birthday. Hope you enjoyed mine." It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't anger. It's peace. The kind that makes the other person realize too late what they destroyed. And for me, it wasn't just peace. It was rebirth. Because in losing him, I found me. In the days that followed, my silence became the loudest thing he'd ever heard. No messages, no explanations, no tears. I had vanished completely from his world, and in that absence, reality began to gnaw at him. I heard from a friend that he'd shown up at my sister's place, asking where I'd gone. My sister told him calmly, "She's finally done cleaning up your mess." That was all. No more details. No comfort. Just truth. He tried calling again. The calls came at odd hours. 2 a.m., 5 a.m., like guilt had started haunting his sleep. I never answered. I didn't need to. Some words don't require to be spoken. Silence says enough. For the first time in years, my mornings were peaceful. I'd wake up, make tea, and sit by the window watching the sunrise, without the weight of disappointment pressing on my chest. Every sip felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd given away too easily. People think revenge is a single act, one big dramatic moment. But the real kind, the kind that changes you, it happens quietly. It's in the moments when you refuse to go back, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop craving closure from the person who broke you. That was my revenge. Not the box, not the note, my peace. Still, fate had one more twist to show me. A month after I left, a letter arrived at my new apartment. No sender name, just my own name, written in his handwriting. My heart raced for a second. I thought of tossing it away, but curiosity is a stubborn thing. Inside, there were 2 pages. The first was a bank statement. The joint account we'd once shared was now empty. He had withdrawn everything. But beside the balance, he'd scribbled, "You moved your share before I did. Smart. I deserved that." The second page was a letter. Not an apology. At least, not the kind I expected. "Clara, when you left, I didn't chase you because I thought you'd come back. You always did. But you didn't. I've been thinking about why that hurts so much. And I realized, you weren't just my wife. You were my mirror. Every time I failed, you reflected what I could have been if I tried. And I hated that. I punished you for being strong when I was weak. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I needed you to know, you taught me what love really means. You just did it too late for me to understand. Mark." I read it twice, maybe 3 times. It didn't make me angry, but it didn't heal me either. It just ended something inside me. For years, I had begged him to see me, to value what I brought into his life. Now, he finally did. Only when I was gone. That's the cruel truth of people like him. They only see light when it stops shining for them. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and went for a walk. It was cold outside, the kind of evening that makes you think about everything and nothing at the same time. As I walked past a small flower shop, a bouquet of white lilies caught my eye. They'd always been my favorite. Quiet, pure, resilient. I bought them. Not for him, not for anyone else, but for me. I placed them in a vase when I got home and stood there smiling softly. That's when I realized the woman who once waited for someone to remember her birthday no longer existed. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, I started building a new life. I took up painting again, something I hadn't done since college. My small apartment became my sanctuary. Warm light, half-finished canvases, music playing softly in the background. One afternoon, while cleaning, I found the last unopened box from my old home. Inside, it was a framed picture of me and Mark, taken years ago at a family dinner. We looked happy, the kind of happy that feels borrowed. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I simply smiled and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me what not to settle for." Then, I placed the frame face down and slid it back into the box. That same evening, I mailed something of my own. It was a small parcel addressed to his office. Inside, there was nothing but a single key, the spare key to our old house, and a note that read, "Return what's inside when you're done living your dream." A symbolic full circle. The next day, my friend texted me. He looked like a ghost when he got your package. Didn't say a word, just sat there. Good, I thought. Maybe silence can be his teacher now, the way it once was mine. Months later, I heard he'd broken up with his girlfriend. Apparently, she'd cheated on him with someone from work. I won't lie, part of me felt satisfaction, but the larger part just felt free. Because that's the thing about karma. You don't need to chase it. You just need to stay still long enough, and it will find its way home. Now, every year when my birthday comes around, I take myself out. I buy the flowers I love, eat the dessert I crave, and toast quietly to peace, to lessons, to the woman I became. Sometimes I still wonder if he remembers. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. But it doesn't matter anymore, because this time, the day belongs to me, fully, finally. And as for the box I sent him, he never replied. But I like to imagine it's still sitting somewhere in his office drawer, a quiet reminder of what happens when you take love for granted. Because that's what my story became. Not a tragedy, but a warning. A warning to those who think love is endless, that hearts don't get tired, that forgiveness will always be waiting at the door. It won't. One day, that door closes, and all that's left is the echo of what could have been. And sometimes, the softest goodbye is the one they never hear, the one wrapped in silence, mailed with a rose petal, and sealed with peace. 6 months later, life had a rhythm again. It wasn't loud or exciting, but it was peaceful, and that peace was golden. My mornings began with sunlight streaming through the curtains, and the gentle hum of the city waking up. I worked part-time at a local art studio, teaching kids how to paint. Their laughter filled the room like music, and every time a child proudly showed me their messy, colorful creation, something inside me healed a little more. But one rainy evening, that peace was interrupted. I came home soaked from the downpour, shaking off my umbrella when I saw a familiar figure waiting at the building's entrance, Mark. He looked smaller. Not physically, but emotionally, like life had chipped away at his pride. His clothes were damp, his eyes tired. For a moment, my heart stuttered, not out of love, but shock. "Clara," he said softly. His voice no longer carried the arrogance it once did. It was quieter, fragile. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, gripping my keys. "About what?" "About everything." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I walked past him and into the lobby. He followed quietly, dripping water on the floor, as if each drop marked the distance between who we used to be and what we'd become. Inside my apartment, I offered him a towel, not out of affection, but out of decency. Old habits die hard, but this time, I knew the boundaries. He sat across from me, eyes scanning the room. My paintings hung neatly on the wall, splashes of color that told stories of recovery, not regret. "You've made a home," he said softly. "I have," I replied. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know what I expected when I came here. Maybe forgiveness, maybe closure, maybe just a chance to say I'm sorry in person." I nodded slightly, letting him continue. He swallowed hard. "After you left, I realized how empty my life was. That girl, she didn't care about me. She cared about what I could give her. When the money was gone, so was she. And me, I was left with nothing but that house, and memories that felt like ghosts." His eyes glistened as he said it. For a man who'd once been all ego, this was his undoing. "I went to the house last week," he added. "It's quiet now. I opened that drawer, the one where you used to keep your notes, and I found something you left behind." My chest tightened. What was it? He smiled sadly. "A birthday card. The one you wrote for yourself that year I forgot. It said, 'You are enough. You always were.'" I looked down, my throat burning. I had forgotten about that card, a small act of self-love on a day that had broken me. "I think that's when it hit me," he said. "You didn't need revenge. You just needed to remember your worth. And I took that from you." For a long moment, I didn't speak. The only sound was the rain tapping against the windows. "Mark," I finally said, my voice steady, "you didn't take it. I gave it away. Because I thought love meant sacrifice. But love without respect is just slow destruction." He nodded, tears pooling in his eyes. "You're right. I destroyed us both. I just came here to tell you, you were the best thing that ever happened to me. And I'm sorry I realized it too late." His words hung in the air, heavy yet freeing. I stood up and walked to the window, staring at the blurred city lights. "You know," I said quietly, "for a long time I wanted to hear those words. But now that I have, they don't change anything. Because forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. It just means I'm done carrying the pain." When I turned around, he was crying, silent, broken tears of someone who finally saw the cost of his own choices. "I understand," he whispered. "You deserve peace, Clara." "I already have it," I said softly. He nodded, stood up, and walked to the door. For a second, he paused, as if waiting for me to stop him the way I used to. But I didn't. I simply smiled and said, "Take care of yourself." He left without another word. When the door closed, I felt a strange calmness wash over me. The ghosts had finally left. The story was complete. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a blank canvas. The brush glided easily, forming shades of blue and gold, a sunrise breaking through storm clouds. When I was done, I titled it, "The Last Goodbye." The next morning, I took the painting to the studio. My students gathered around, asking what it meant. I told them, it's about freedom, the kind that comes when you stop trying to fix what was never yours to fix. Weeks later, I got an email from a gallery that wanted to feature my artwork in a small exhibition. It wasn't fame or fortune, but it was validation that my pain had turned into purpose. On opening night, I stood in the gallery surrounded by people admiring my work. A journalist asked, "What inspired this collection?" I smiled and said, "A heartbreak that became my teacher." And for the first time, saying those words didn't sting. They felt like truth, finally unburdened. That night, as I walked home, I passed by a cafe that was playing soft music. A couple sat near the window, laughing, holding hands the way Mark and I once did. But instead of sadness, I felt gratitude. Because sometimes, life has to break you just enough to help you see yourself clearly. When I got home, I poured a glass of wine, lit a candle, and whispered a quiet thank you to the universe. For the pain, for the lessons, for the woman I became when I stopped waiting to be remembered. I was no longer the wife who cried over forgotten birthdays. I was the artist who painted her healing, stroke by stroke. Months passed, and life continued in its soft, steady rhythm. I no longer checked my phone expecting apologies, nor did I replay old arguments in my head. The peace that once felt foreign now felt like home. My apartment, once silent with loneliness, was filled with laughter again. Friends visiting for tea, my students dropping off sketches, the sound of a life rebuilt one quiet joy at a time. Then, one afternoon, an envelope arrived. No return address, just my name written in a familiar hand. I hesitated before opening it, my heart giving a small, cautious thump. Inside was a single letter from Mark. He wrote, "Clara, you were right. Forgiveness isn't reunion. But I still want to say thank you, not for leaving me, but for teaching me what love really looks like." I sold the house. The proceeds went to a women's shelter downtown, the one you used to volunteer at. I thought maybe that's how I could honor what I destroyed. Take care, Mark. I read it twice, then folded it back into the envelope and smiled. A soft, bittersweet smile. That letter wasn't a plea for redemption. It was closure, finally arriving in words that no longer hurt. Later that evening, I walked to the art studio where I kept a box of my early paintings, pieces I'd painted during my darkest days. I pulled out one that I'd never finished, a portrait of a woman sitting at a table, staring at a single candle on her birthday. I'd painted it after that night he forgot me. The colors were dull, muted with gray. But that night I picked up a brush and finished it. I added light to her eyes, color to the candle, and warmth to the background. When I stepped back, I realized what I had painted wasn't pain anymore. It was resilience. The next day, I hung it in my studio with a small plaque underneath. She remembered herself. Weeks later, a woman who often walked by my window came in. She stood in front of that painting for a long time. Then she turned to me and said, "It feels like she's forgiving herself." I smiled. She is. That moment reminded me how universal pain is, and how healing, when embraced, becomes contagious. We all hurt, we all lose. But if we choose to rise, others see that it's possible for them too. As time went on, my story began to take new shapes. A local magazine interviewed me about my art and resilience. The writer asked, "Do you ever regret what happened? The revenge, the pain, the distance?" I paused before answering. No, because if he hadn't forgotten my birthday, I might have never remembered my worth. The article was titled "The Art of Letting Go." It spread quickly. People reached out, sharing their own stories of heartbreak, betrayal, and rediscovery. And for the first time, I understood something profound. My story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. One evening, I received an email from the women's shelter Mark mentioned in his letter. They thanked me for the donation made in my name. Apparently, he had used part of the proceeds to establish an art therapy room for women starting over. Attached was a photo, a small, bright room filled with easels, canvases, and brushes. In the corner hung a single frame with a note, dedicated to Clara, who taught me that love without respect isn't love at all. Tears blurred my vision as I read it. I didn't feel pity or anger, only peace. Because even if the love we shared ended painfully, it still evolved into something meaningful. That night, I went for a walk through the city. The air was crisp, the sky deep purple, the streets shimmering under lamplight. Every step felt lighter than the last. I passed by a florist, bought a single white rose, and left it outside the women's shelter door, a quiet symbol of gratitude. As I turned to leave, I whispered, "We're both free now." Back home, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. My reflection stared back at me, not the broken woman I once was, but someone whole, someone who learned that revenge doesn't always come through destruction. Sometimes it comes through peace, the kind that no one can take away. The next morning, I received a call from the art gallery again. They wanted me to host a small workshop, Art as Healing. When I stood before the attendees, I told them my story. Not as a victim, but as a survivor. I said, "Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to others, but what you do for yourself when you rise." The audience clapped softly, not out of pity, but recognition. They saw themselves in my words. After the session, a young woman approached me. "I left someone who forgot me too," she said quietly, "but I don't know how to stop feeling angry." I smiled gently. "Then paint it, cry it, write it. Just don't let it live inside you forever. Let it out, and it will stop owning you." She nodded, and I saw that spark, that tiny flicker of healing, just as someone once saw it in me. That night, I went home and added one final painting to my wall. An abstract swirl of gold and silver, shaped like two paths crossing but not colliding. I titled it Release. I realized that life doesn't always give us happy endings, but it gives us powerful closures. My story wasn't about a man forgetting my birthday anymore. It was about a woman remembering herself, and that was far more beautiful. Before turning off the lights, I looked at my reflection one last time and whispered the words I wished I had known years ago. "You didn't lose him, Clara. You found you." And as the night settled softly around me, I smiled, truly, deeply, knowing that was the best gift I could have ever given myself.